Welcome, dear viewers and listeners. You are on the Ruslan Belov Analytical Channel. Today is March 10th, 2026, and the information landscape of the past 24 hours has been so packed with events of colossal importance that we skip the preamble and get straight to business. The volume of material is enormous, so let us proceed to a detailed breakdown. Leading our broadcast today is a story that is a strong contender for the most significant event, not just of this week, but possibly of the entire year. We are talking about a telephone conversation between the presidents of the United States and Russia, which took place yesterday evening. The initiative came from the American side, which is in itself a powerful diplomatic signal. Putin's foreign policy aide Yuri Ushakov held a detailed briefing in which he confirmed that the conversation was distinctly businesslike, pragmatic, and constructive in character. The leaders spoke for approximately 1 hour, and in that seemingly brief window of time, they managed to cover an entire spectrum of the world's most acute pressure points. The agenda included the crisis around Venezuela, the Cuban question, the deeply complex Ukrainian conflict, and of course the situation in the Middle East, where Iran was the central theme. Almost immediately after the call ended, highly intriguing insider reports began filtering into the global information space. Clear and serious signals emerged pointing to a strong probability that the United States administration may in the very near future initiate a process of partially lifting sanctions against the Russian Federation. What is the true reason behind such a sharp warming of relations? The answer lies entirely in the economic sphere. The occupant of the Oval Office faces a critically important, one might even say existentially necessary, domestic political task: preventing an explosive surge in global hydrocarbon prices and keeping oil below the psychological threshold of $100 per barrel at any cost. Recall the timeline. Just yesterday, genuine panic gripped the world's commodity exchanges as quotes for the most sought-after grades of crude broke through the ceiling and traded at a threatening level of $120 per barrel. Some authoritative financial analysts and energy sector experts began publishing truly apocalyptic forecasts, predicting a surge to a fantastical $250 per barrel. For Trump, such a scenario is the equivalent of political catastrophe. Stable oil below $100 is precisely the economic breathing room that would give the administration the capacity to continue its hard confrontation with Iran. Moreover, this geopolitical game is stretched out over time. Trump needs to hold on until the autumn congressional elections without destroying the national economy through high gasoline prices. His logic is perfectly clear. The more time he has secured by stable oil prices, the greater his chances of achieving loud, triumphant successes on the international stage and converting them into domestic political capital on the eve of the midterm elections. The reaction from the markets was instantaneous. The moment headlines about a hypothetical easing of anti-Russian sanctions began running across news agency tickers, crude oil prices plunged sharply downward. If just yesterday we were watching $120 per barrel, today trading opened in an entirely different reality. Certain grades of oil rolled back to a far more comfortable level of $85 per barrel. Such a rapid drop in prices has the potential to radically reshape the entire architecture of the developing Middle Eastern crisis. The Russian stock market responded with powerful gains. Virtually every domestic company whose activities are tied to the extraction, processing, and transportation of energy resources is showing explosive growth in its share prices. Nevertheless, despite all these economic maneuvers, the Trump administration has no intention of taking its foot off the pedal on the Iran situation. On the contrary, escalation is only intensifying. Alarming messages are arriving from Washington today, confirmed both by the president personally and by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. According to their statements, an unprecedented military operation against Iran of extraordinary destructive power is expected in the coming night, deploying the full spectrum of conventional weaponry in the Pentagon's arsenal. The fundamental strategic objective that overshadows all others is the complete unblocking of the Strait of Hormuz. It is Tehran's physical control over this most critical waterway in the world that holds global markets hostage and drives the surge in energy prices. If we look at the current maritime traffic data in the Strait of Hormuz area for the past 24 hours, the picture is deeply troubling. The movement of commercial vessels and massive oil tankers is virtually paralyzed. Only Chinese tankers are passing through the strait unimpeded. Iran classifies vessels sailing under the flag of the People's Republic of China as friendly, and they are therefore exempt from the unofficial embargo. In parallel, coalition forces have begun launching preemptive strikes against vessels that intelligence suggests may be affiliated with Iran's commercial fleet. Video footage of one such tanker being struck and completely destroyed is already circulating online. Additionally, reports are coming in of at least 2 more oil tankers sustaining damage, whose ownership is still being determined. Burning tankers in the Gulf are the worst nightmare imaginable for insurance companies, and this will inevitably fuel another round of energy price increases if the situation is not brought under firm control. The Iranian side is not taking this lying down. Over the past 24 hours, Iran's armed forces and formations under their control have carried out a series of bold strikes against critical energy infrastructure and refining facilities in Qatar and Bahrain. We have video material capturing a powerful explosion and subsequent fire at a major refinery in the region. Strikes were also launched against American military bases on Bahrain's territory, employing both combat drones and ballistic missiles. However, judging by high-resolution satellite imagery, the actual physical damage to American military infrastructure turned out to be quite limited. Iran's strategy here reads fairly clearly. Identify the most vulnerable logistics node, strike it with precision, demonstrate capability, but avoid provoking a total retaliatory strike. The coalition's response is incomparably more powerful. Published damage assessment materials demonstrate the results of a strike against a logistics hub in the Isfahan area. The before images show a vast territory densely packed with warehouses and military facilities. The after images show a lunar landscape. Analysts estimate the ratio of firepower at approximately 40-1. Literally every square meter of the base was methodically erased from the face of the Earth in the course of a coordinated attack. Iran is hitting back, but its resource base and technological capabilities do not allow it to respond with strikes of comparable scale. Dear friends, before we continue, if this format of deep analytical breakdown is of value to you, please subscribe to the channel right now and hit the bell. It costs you absolutely nothing, but for the development of this channel, it is of colossal importance. It is your support that allows us to continue this work. Subscribe, and let us keep going. Tehran's primary trump card remains control over the Strait of Hormuz. The entire American strategy is focused on knocking that card out of Iran's hand. Trump has already issued a public appeal to ship owners to resume passage of tankers through the strait, assuring them of an adequate level of security. However, against the backdrop of relentless shelling, these assurances ring unconvincing for now. The impression is forming that Washington is employing a tactical game in which commercial vessels may inadvertently serve as bait. If Iran decides to strike them, it will be forced to activate its concealed coastal missile batteries, thereby exposing them and laying them open to an immediate, overwhelming strike by coalition aircraft. In response to these maneuvers, official Tehran issued 2 extremely tough political statements. First, if the monarchies of the Persian Gulf wish to guarantee the security of their exports, they are obligated to immediately expel the entire American and Israeli diplomatic corps from their territories and shut down their missions. Second, if the states of the region wish to avoid retaliatory strikes on their territory, they must categorically prohibit the use of their infrastructure by coalition forces for attacks against Iran. In essence, Iranian diplomacy has presented the Gulf monarchies with 3 scenarios. The first, the inertial scenario. The status quo is maintained, the coalition continues using their bases, and their energy infrastructure automatically becomes a legitimate target, while passage of their vessels through the strait is blocked entirely. The second, the compromise scenario. The Arab states proceed with a diplomatic démarche and expel the American and Israeli ambassadors, in which case Iran may, as a gesture of goodwill, allow their tankers to pass through the strait. The third, the radical scenario. A complete withdrawal of all foreign military contingents in exchange for a full cessation of all hostile actions against these states. Not one of the Gulf capitals has yet officially responded to this unprecedented ultimatum. The monarchies have adopted a wait-and-see posture, hoping that the American military machine will destroy Iran's capabilities before they are forced to make a painful choice. However, time is working against them. According to the most optimistic expert projections, if the maritime blockade is not lifted within the next few days, the UAE will face a full-scale humanitarian crisis. Approximately 70% of the country's consumed food products are imported by sea, and if this logistics channel is severed, supermarket shelves will empty with frightening speed. Meanwhile, bearing down on the conflict zone at full steam is the French carrier strike group, led by the nuclear aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle. Yesterday evening, President Macron personally arrived on board the flagship and addressed the crew and carrier-based pilots in a speech aimed at raising their fighting spirit ahead of the coming operation. This unambiguously signals that Paris has made its final decision on the participation of its armed forces in the campaign. The French squadron's primary task, in close coordination with the Americans, is to break the blockade and restore freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. The denouement of the Middle Eastern crisis is inexorably approaching. Let us now shift our focus to Ukraine, from where the past 24 hours have delivered a massive volume of important information. Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Syrskyi made a bold claim of a major operational success on the Zaporizhzhia axis, stating that Ukrainian units had advanced and returned approximately 400 square kilometers of territory to Ukrainian control. As supporting evidence, video footage was published of a bold armored thrust by Ukrainian mechanized units into the settlement of Novohorivka. OSINT specialists quickly conducted geolocation and confirmed without question that the events did indeed unfold in the center of the village. We adjusted our map in favor of the Ukrainian armed forces. However, almost immediately pro-Russian military correspondents published their own footage from that same settlement. It showed Russian infantry methodically working from building to building, pushing the Ukrainian assault groups back out. A similar picture is playing out in the area of Verbov. The map was adjusted in favor of the Ukrainians in the morning, but by evening, Russian units had published a video report of clearing operations on the western outskirts, and the map had to be adjusted again. Analyzing the totality of this frequently contradictory material, one can conclude that we are witnessing a classic Ukrainian information operation designed to generate a strong media effect. In reality, the front line on the northern face of the Zaporizhzhia front represents what can best be described as a patchwork quilt, a chaotic, ragged structure where control over individual blocks within a single village can change hands multiple times in a single day. This is the direct legacy of the large-scale February counteroffensive, which had stalled by the beginning of spring. On the ground, the Russian army continues to methodically press its agenda. The primary axis of pressure is pointed at the strategically important city of Orikhiv, with the advance being driven from the direction of Huliaipol. The city is being subjected to unprecedented bombardment with heavy glide bombs, and the key bridge linking Preobrazhenka and Orikhiv has been destroyed. Russian command is clearly laying the groundwork for a decisive assault, attempting to place the Ukrainian grouping in operational pincers within the triangle of Novodanilivka, Novoandriivka, Orikhiv. In parallel, Huliaipolska and Lyubutska are being subjected to heavy artillery and airstrikes. On the Dobropoli sector, the arrival of spring and improving weather conditions have produced a sharp increase in the intensity of strikes using heavy glide bombs with wing correction modules. This tactic will only continue to scale up. In the Hryashin area, Russian assault groups are grinding through defenses in a northwesterly direction, step by step. A number of pro-Russian analysts are already asserting that the settlement has fully passed under the operational control of the Russian armed forces. On the Kostiantynivka axis, the situation for the Ukrainian garrison is extremely difficult. The Russian army is expanding its zone of control on the southern and eastern approaches to the city, which is under continuous grinding fire from heavy artillery. Beyond conventional strike methods, infrastructure warfare is being applied. The destruction of a dam in the northern part of Kostiantynivka has flooded adjacent areas and effectively split the city in two, critically hampering the supply of the eastern sector of the Ukrainian defense. We have already seen this tactical approach before, in February, when the Syrskyi reservoir dam was deliberately blown to cut off the northwestern defense sector from the logistics hub at Druzhkivka. On the Sloviansk axis, Russian units have consolidated their hold on Holubivka along the M03 highway and continue advancing toward the Syrskyi Donbass Canal, methodically pushing the opposing forces back. On the Lyman axis and along the entire northern border, no significant changes in the front line have been recorded. However, this calm may prove deceptive. Senior representatives of Ukraine's Ministry of Defense and General Staff have issued a troubling forecast. As part of the spring-summer campaign of 2026, Russia is reportedly planning to open a powerful new front in the north, establishing a buffer zone no less than 20 kilometers wide, stretching from the Bryansk region through the Sumy Oblast to Vovchansk and onward, linking up with the existing front toward Kupiansk. The objective is to physically push Ukrainian long-range artillery deeper into Ukrainian territory, denying the Ukrainian armed forces the ability to strike civilian towns in Russia's border regions. How close these plans are to implementation will become clear in the coming months. It is worth noting separately that the negotiating process within the Russia-United States-Ukraine triangle has effectively stalled. The next meeting of delegations, which had been planned in the UAE, has been postponed indefinitely due to the Persian Gulf crisis. Moscow is in no hurry to accelerate the diplomatic track, preferring to consolidate favorable positions on the battlefield while the political environment plays to its advantage. Meanwhile, from Europe comes news that the parliaments of Hungary and Slovakia are in the final stages of adopting legislative acts that would de facto block Ukraine's Euro-Atlantic integration. This is a severe diplomatic blow to Kyiv, rendering the prospects of EU membership practically unattainable in the foreseeable future. On that note, our detailed analytical breakdown of the events of March 10, 2026, comes to a close. Thank you each and every one of you for your attention and for giving your time to our analysis. Subscribe to the channel, leave your ratings, write your comments. Your opinion matters enormously to us. Take care of yourselves, maintain your critical thinking, and until we meet again on air.